So in this lecture, we want to talk about something called functions, right? So functions are an extremely important part of any programming language. Okay. And before we talk about what are functions and what exactly we need to do to use functions, let's look at a problem. Let's try to solve that problem, and that will tell us why functions are very important. Okay. So the problem I want to solve, I want to write code for NCR, n choose R. So this basically means I have n objects and I have to choose R objects out of them. So how many ways are there? The formula for n choose R is n factorial divided by R factorial n minus R factorial. That's how you define NCR. Okay, so let's try to write code for this. Perfect. Okay, so I need to take n input from the user. Sorry, take n input from the user. I need to take R as input. Then I have to find n factorial, R factorial, n minus R factorial. Right. So n factorial is something I need to calculate. So how do I find factorial? Okay, so how can we find factorial? So n factorial is basically 1 into 2 into 3 into n. So the way we have done sum of n natural numbers, we can do multiplication of n natural numbers, or the way we have printed n natural numbers, we can just multiply n natural numbers as well. Okay, so I'm going to start my n factorial from 1. I'm going to go from for I in range, starting from 1, I want to go till n, so I'm going to go till n plus 1. I'm going to write n plus 1, it's going to go till n. The step is by default 1 and I need a step of 1 as well, so that's fine. My n factorial will be n factorial into I. So we'll first multiply with 1, then we'll multiply with 2, then we'll multiply with 3 up to n. So we multiply with all of them. Now what we need to do is, so we have found n factorial. Now we need to do R factorial. So the code will be almost the same, except the fact that I need to go from 1 to R, and the output will be stored in R factorial. Right? Exactly the same code, and I have copied that code, and I have just need to change the input and the output. Okay. One more time, but this time n minus R factorial. Third component of the formula was n minus R factorial. Okay, so this time we will go till n minus R plus 1, so it's going to stop at n minus R. And let's change this as well. And you have found all of this. So your answer will be n factorial divided by R factorial into n minus R factorial. That will be our answer. Whether we want to use a single slash or a double slash doesn't matter, because NCR is always integer. So the division will always be integer. So the result of this division will always be an integer. Okay, so I can use integer division as well. And then we can print our answer. Run this. 4 choose 2 is 6, which I think is correct. So we can try running it for multiple examples, but I think this will work fine. Okay. So I don't like this code much, right? I don't like this code much because there is this part of code which we have repeated many times, 3 times. It is exactly the same code, right? It's almost the same code that we are repeating 3 times. That's why I don't like this code much. Ideally, what I would like to do is, I would like that I have written some factorial method somewhere. The way we are able to call print from anywhere, I would want that we have defined a factorial function or a method somewhere which asks me, hey, for which value do you want factorial for? And it returns me, it gives me the output, which is the factorial of the input that I have provided to this method. Okay, that's what I would like to do. We have already seen some methods, right? Like we have already seen CHR, we have seen ORD, we have seen some methods already. Similarly, I would like to write this method or a function, we call these functions, which will basically be a black box for me, a block which basically takes an input from me and gives me an output. So if I need a factorial of 3 numbers, I don't have to repeat the code, I just ask this box, hey, give me the factorial for 4, hey, give me the factorial for 2, hey, give me the factorial for 3, and it will do the calculation and give me the result. And I don't have to repeat the code again and again. Okay, that's what we need functions for. So functions allow you to do that. Functions allow you to create a block of code which you can call from anywhere, They will take an input from you and they will give you an output back. Okay, that's why we need functions. That's how we are going to use functions in our code. Okay, perfect. So how do we write a function? So to write a function, this is the syntax that we need to use. We need to write def. So we are defining something. So def is how you define a function. You need to write def. Then you need to write the function name. So for example, my function name is factorial. Then you need to put brackets and you need to tell how many inputs should this function expect. For example, I am saying, hey, I want you to calculate factorial for me. But then my question will be, you need to provide me a number. Because unless you provide me a number, what is the, like, for what exactly I'm going to find the factorial for? And for example, you are asking me, hey, calculate me a factorial, and I'll give you two numbers. So that's again confusing for me. Do you want me to calculate factorial for both of them? Or the first one, or the subtraction of them, or the addition of them? So what exactly do you want me to do? So we need to define a function. We should be while we are creating a function, we should be very, very clear. This is what we want to use our function for. This is how we are going to use our function. So we need to define what exactly is the input that we will require and what exactly is the output that we will be producing. So while you're creating the function, you need to define the name. So I've already defined the name, which is fact. And within these brackets, I need to write how many inputs should I expect in this function. For example, for finding factorial, we can say, hey, I would take one number. Okay, I'll take only one input. Let's say that is n. So this is how you write it. Def space name of the function, brackets, and how many inputs are you expecting. Factorial will expect only one input. Okay, so let's repeat this. So let's just copy this code from here. Okay, it has to be indented properly. And once you have found the answer, then you need to return the output, right? If I'm saying, hey, find me factorial of 4, I don't want this function to print 4 or print factorial of 4. I don't want this function to do that. I want this function to tell me the answer, right? That's what I want here. I want, if here, instead of writing this code, I somehow want to do this. Factorial of n. So I want factorial n, this function, to calculate n factorial for me and give me that value, because I want to use that value going forward. At some place I want to use that value, right? So the way to do that, in the function, you can say, hey, I want to return this value. This is my result. I want to return this. Okay, I want to return this value. Okay, so seems like we have written this function. Let me just run this so that this function is defined now. Now, if you call this function, it gives you the factorial value back. So right now, just telling me that the output of this cell is 6. If I do 4, it will give me 4 factorial, and so on. It will work absolutely fine. So that's how you call a function. How? So you need to take the function name, and this function is saying I need one input. So you need to provide one input, and it will evaluate the result for you and it will give you the value back. So the value it is giving back me is the factorial of the number I am giving it. Perfect. So that is one way to call it. And when you're calling it, if you want, you can store the value somewhere. So now A will have the value 24 instead of 24 just being the output of the cell. Now A contains 24. Whatever was returned by the function has been stored into the variable that you asked us to do that. Okay. So if you print A, it's 24. So now this was one implementation of the function. What I want to do is I will take input, then I'll say, hey, n factorial is equal to factorial of n. R factorial is factorial of r. N minus r factorial is factorial of n minus r. So I have all three values with me, all three results with me, and my answer will be simply n factorial divided by r factorial into n minus r factorial. And then I can print my answer. And we still get our answer to be 6, which is exactly what we were looking for. But I like this code so much more. It's easier to read. It's not repeating a lot of code, and basically it looks much more neater to me, much more cleaner to me, right? So I think this code is so much better than this code. Okay, and that's how we can use functions. Okay, so basically what has happened here is, let's look at these three calls here. So I gave n, let me run this again. Let me take another example, right? So I gave it 5 and 2. So first of all, it calls factorial n. So what's happening? It's saying, hey, calculate factorial 5 for me. So effectively, this n here is actually different from this n, right? They are two different variables. Don't get confused on that. If you want, for now, let's just use a different name here. Don't worry about this. Let's just use a different name here. Does not matter. Don't worry about this. Okay. So this will still work. So what's happening here is you say factorial of 5. So this function gets called and a's value becomes 5 when you call this function. Go through this function, you find 5 factorial, you return the value, and whatever value you return gets stored in n factorial. So your n factorial becomes 5 factorial, which is 120. So your n factorial has 120 in it. In the next line, you're saying find factorial of r. So you're finding factorial of 2. So r is 2. So this time, this function is called again, and this time a gets a value of 2. So you find 2 factorial. So this gets a 2 factorial answer, which is 2, right? And then you call n minus r factorial, and n minus r factorial is, n minus r is 3. So you again go here and your a becomes 3. Whatever is the number, a becomes that. It calculates the value, 3 factorial is 6. So you have 6, 2, 120. Answer becomes 120 by 6 into 2, which is 10. That's how the answer which is getting printed is 10. Okay, that's how the answer is printed. Perfect. So I hope you understand the intuition why and how functions are very useful. And I hope you understand that how we created a function. We have created a function and then we were able to call this function. We could just directly pass the value that we want to pass. Hi. So I hope you understand how to create functions, right? We'll look at 3-4 more examples which will make things very, very clear. But for now, before we go ahead and do that, I just want to talk a little more on why do we need functions? So I think one use case you have already seen, that was we were able to avoid repetition of code. We had to write some code 3 times and the code was exactly the same, but here we are able to avoid all of that by making a function of that code which was getting repeated and calling that function again and again. Effectively, you are calling the same 3 lines again and again, and you don't have to repeat those lines, right? So functions are extremely useful for that. I think along with that, there are a few more benefits of functions that we should talk about. First of all, I feel this code here is a lot more readable. It's a lot more readable compared to this one. It's much, much better, right? Much, much better. Why? Because here, whatever you say, you have to go through this code, and every time you read these lines, you have to try and understand what exactly is happening here. Right? You will read this, okay, this is going from 1 to n, this is what exactly is happening, this is what it is doing. So it's still a lot more work to do, but here it's very straightforward. Take n, take r, find factorial, find n minus r, and that's how you find the answer, and that's how you print it. The only thing that you need to do is go back and try and understand how exactly factorial is working. So you just need to read this code only once. You need to try and understand factorial code only once, and then every time factorial is used, you are not worried about if factorial is working or not. Factorial is working because you have already seen that, right? So I think readability is improved a lot. We have already seen avoids repetition. And I think another big advantage of using functions is testability. Testing becomes super easy. Here, I can test this function separately. I give it 10 examples of factorial, whatever way I want to test it, I can test factorial in 10 different ways and like be absolutely sure that this works fine. And then I don't have to worry about factorial within this code. The more code you repeat, you have to test all of that, right? Even if you're copying the same code, you have to repeat, like you have to test it thoroughly. So testing becomes a lot more easier. So there are a lot of advantages of using functions like readability improvement, testing becomes easier, you are able to avoid repetitions, and generally it's very, very helpful to create functions. I think even writing code becomes easier. I'm able to divide my tasks properly. That, hey, to find NCR, you need a factorial. So let's write a factorial function and we will use that. In a lot of problems, in a lot of questions that we will be solving, what we will do is, Okay, to solve this question, I need these three components, and let's write three different functions for handling those components. So you are able to divide your problem into smaller chunks and focus on those smaller chunks instead of worrying about this big problem. So things become easier to solve as well as soon as you think of modular functions, which basically are one of the many problems that you have to solve, one of the many sub problems that you have to solve to actually solve a bigger problem. Okay, so functions are very, very important. We'll be using them throughout, and please get used to it. In the next session, we'll start writing few more examples of functions. Okay, thank you. Hi. So in this session, I want to implement a couple of functions. So problems that we have solved earlier, but we'll write them again. But in this time, we'll be using functions. Okay. So the first and our favorite is checking if a number is prime. So let's quickly write a function which, given a number, check if the number is prime or not. So this function is going to take an input which is going to be a number, right? Because it requires a number to check whether the number is prime or not. And the return, what is this function going to return? What does it sound like? Check if the number is prime or not. So it should return us true or false. So it's going to return a boolean. Okay. So let's quickly get to writing code. Perfect. Awesome. Okay. So I want to write a function which will be is prime. Name your functions so that they are readable, right? Like as soon as you see is prime, it's very clear that the number is going to check whether the number is prime or not. So we'll take a number n, and it need not be n. You can write like any variable name. So I'm just taking a variable to be n. Okay. Now what? So now you need to check if the number is prime or not. So it's as good as you had a line just above n is equals to int input, right? It's as good as you have that n already given to you in this function. So you have n, you need to check whether the number is prime or not. We already know how to do that. So let me just quickly write the code for d in range 2 to n. If n divides d, if d divides n, in that case we want to break. Otherwise we want to keep running. And if you remember, so we will come into else only if we have gone through all the numbers and we haven't broken through the loop, right? Like we haven't broken through the loop. So the break statement has not caused the end of the loop. The end of the loop has been caused because the range has been finished. So if the range has been finished, that basically means that it's a prime number. So in else you can return true. In else you can return true. That basically means if I'm coming to else, that means I've gone through all the range. Nothing could divide d. Nothing could divide n. That means I can return true. The number is a prime number. Now you can't just return true, you have to return false as well. Your function should return something, right? Like in case the number is not a prime number, then it should return a false. So where do I return a false? So I think what I'm going to do is, I'm going to return a false just after our for loop, right? I'm going to return a false here. Now what does this mean? This basically means that in case I'm going through the whole range, I'm going to come to else and I'm going to return true. As soon as you return, the function is done. You don't do anything else in that function anymore. So in case you reach return true, you will not come to return false. So as soon as you say return, your function is finished. So it's not going to execute anything else below that. Okay. So that basically means if I go through the complete range, I'm going to come into else and I will return from the function I'm done. In case it does not go to the else, it will come here, and because it has come here, that means it did not go to else. That means it did not go through the complete range. That means we could find something that was able to divide n, so we will return false from here. Okay, we'll return false from here. Okay, let's see if it really works or not. Is prime 10 is not a prime number? Let's say 17 is a prime number. So seems like it's working fine, right? So we have been able to write code for is prime. The second one I want to pick, the second example I want to pick is print all prime numbers from 2 to n, right? Print all prime numbers from 2 to n. So first of all, this function is supposed to print the prime numbers from 2 to n. It will not return anything. This function does not return anything. So it will basically just print everything that it needs to print, and it will not return anything. Okay. So the function will look something like this. Prime from 2 to n. I'm going to get an n. I need to print all the prime numbers from 2 to n. So if you remember, for k in range, we'll go from 2 to n plus, we'll write n plus 1 so that we go till n. For k in this range, we want to check if k is prime. So here you need to check if k is prime. And in case it is prime, we print k. Right? That's what we need to do. So you are given a number k and you have to check if it is prime or not. Do we need to write that code here? I don't think we need to write that code here. We already have a function to do exactly that. So basically what we will do is, let's take a variable is k prime. Let's call is prime function on k. And we will get a true or false. We will get true only if k is prime. That means if is k prime, if you get a true return, then we will print k. And I think that's it. That's what we need to do. That's all. So we are going through 2 to n using this range. We're going to 2 to n. For every such k, we are checking if k is prime, and if it is prime, then we are printing it. I think we are done. And we were able to do it so quickly because we were able to use this function which we had written earlier. Right? See how powerful functions are. We don't have to write all that code again. And it became so much easier. Now I think it's much easier to read this code as well, because what we're saying is, hey, go take a k, go from 2 to n, check if it is prime, if it is prime, prime. I think it's very, very readable. Right? It's a lot more readable than what we had. So if you run this, it's not going to do anything. It's going to do something when you call this function. So prime from 2 to n, let's print all prime numbers till 20. And as soon as I call it, it prints all the prime numbers till 20. 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, 13, 17, 19 are the prime numbers from 2 to 20. Okay, so seems like we are able to achieve what we wanted to achieve using functions. Okay, perfect. I just want to create one more function. In the introduction video to functions, we talked about NCR, right? So we wrote this function, this code to find NCR. I just want to move this code into a function, right? So we had a function for checking factorial. I just want to write another function for calculating NCR. Now to calculate NCR, what do you require? What is the input? I think the input is n and r. You need both these numbers to calculate NCR and choose r. So the input has to be n as well as r. So we require two inputs. So we need to put a comma in between. So we require n comma r, two inputs. And then we just need to have exactly the same code that we had written above. I'm just going to copy this. So we will use the factorial function here as well. So you find n factorial, you find r factorial, you find n minus r factorial. You get the answer. Then we don't print the answer. NCR function is going to return that value, right? It's going to return that value. See, the difference between printing and returning is huge. For example, if my factorial function was not returning and instead just printing, if it was not returning, I will not get the n factorial value here. Calling factorial n will just print n factorial. Calling factorial r will just print r factorial. Calling factorial n minus r will just print n minus r factorial. If you're not going to get these values back from the function, how will you evaluate answer? How will you get to this? Right? The job was not to print n factorial, r factorial, n minus r factorial. The job was to find out NCR. Right? To find out NCR. And to find out NCR, we require these three values from the function. We don't want function to print it. We want the function to give it back to us so that we can do what we want to do with those values. Okay? Perfect. So we have this function as well. Let me quickly call this function NCR 5,2, and I think that's the correct answer. Okay, perfect. So seems like we are able to take care of, we are able to write functions. We know how to return values. We know if the function requires more than one value, what we need to do. Sometimes the function is just going to print it. Sometimes the function is going to return it. So it will depend from function to function what we want to achieve in that. Okay. I hope things are clear, and they'll keep getting better as soon as we keep practicing more and more functions. Okay. Thank you. Hi. So in this session, I want to talk about how exactly does function calling works. How exactly does function calling works, right? What exactly happens when we are calling functions here and there? Okay. So we will look at an example, but before that, let's quickly just try to draw what exactly is going on. So for example, let's say uh, I call a function A, and function A in turns calls a function B, and let's say function B in turn calls a function C, right? And there is this function C. Okay, so I have called A calls B calls C, and C just does whatever C needs to do. We have seen this, right? We called NCR internally called factorial. Now factorial could have called something else, and there is no stopping that, right? So what exactly happens? So there is all this work. While all this work is happening, you need to store all the variables. You have so much data around that you need to store. You need to know when C is done with the work, you need to come back here. When B is done with the work, you need to come back here. When A is done with the work, you need to come back here. Right? That's how things were working. Right? So I called NCR, and in turn NCR called fact, and when fact was done, it came back to NCR, and NCR completed its work, right? And when NCR was done, it came back and let me print the value of NCR. So that's how things were running, right? So let's see how things work. So I'm calling A. Now let's say A has print A A start, and then it calls B. Then let's say it says print A end. So now B, let's say, has print BS, then it calls C, then we print B end, and the same happens in C. Let's say it says print CS and print CE. So C is not calling any other function. So what happens here? What gets printed when? Right? So as soon as you call A, it comes inside A. It prints AS, so the first thing will be printed AS. Then it calls B. So the execution of A will stop till the time B is done with its work. Right? A is saying, hey, I need this to complete my work. So everything in A will be on hold till the point B is done. So after AS, AE will not be printed yet. We'll go to B. B will print BS, because that's the first thing. Then B will not print BE yet. It will first call C. Once you go inside C, it will print CS. Then it will print CE, because C is not calling anything else. Now C is done with its work. Then you will come back here. Once you come back here, this instruction is done. This line is done. It's going to move to the next line. So you will print BE, and then B is done. It will go back here. Then you will print AE, and when you're done with this, you will come back here. So that's how things are going to get printed. Okay. Now, if you look closely, what happened here is, first of all, from here you called function A, then you called function B, then you called function C. Let's say we had a function D as well, and so on. The last function will have to finish its work before coming back to the previous function. C is waiting till the point D is not done. B is waiting till the point C is not done. And A was waiting for B to be done, B was waiting for C to be done, and so on. A was the first function to be called, and A will be the last function to finish. Because A is going to wait for B, B is waiting for C, C is in turn waiting for D, and so on. So, if you look closely, A came first in, last out. That's how function calling works. The first function coming in goes last out. The last function coming in goes first out. Okay, so that's how function calling actually works. We actually call it the call stack. Stack is generally called something which is first in last out. For example, a book stack. You have a lot of books, right? The first book that was kept will be the last which will be taken out. This book came last, but this will be the first one to be removed. So this is a book stack. So stack is basically a word. We'll read about, like we'll study about this in data structures as well. Stack is a data structure which basically signifies first in last out or last in first out. Okay, so this is called a call stack because the function which came first will be the last one to go out. The function which came last will be the first one to come out. In the call stack, we maintain the functions that A is coming, then B is coming, then C is coming. And we store all their local variables as well, all the local data that they have. For example, if A has an N and let's say a whatever NA this function was using, whatever variables it was using, we'll keep them there as well, because when we come back, we will need those variables, right? For example, inside A, let's say we have something like this, you call B and then you say print N. Now you go to B, but once you come back, you need to print this N. So you need to have this N with you. So that's why we keep all these details in the stack as well. So all the information regarding this function, knowing that when B is done, where should it go back? That information also needs to be stored. That when B is done, it need to come back here. So all that information is basically used, is stored, and we use a call stack for doing that. Okay, perfect. So that's how basically whenever we are calling functions, that's how we store data and that's how things are implemented. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Hi. So in this session, I want to talk about scope of variables. So what is scope of variables? Right. So when you define a variable, it's not necessary that you can use it anywhere. There is some scope associated with variables, that if you define a variable here, in what all limit can you use this variable? So we'll see scope as well as lifetime. So whatever is the scope of the variable will live only within that scope, and as soon as that code is run, that code is done, you will not have access to the variable anymore. Okay, so we need to look at scope of the variable. In languages like Java and C++, there is a lot more things which are happening with respect to scope of variables. Python is relatively simpler, right? In Python, it's relatively simpler. So in Python, you have basically two kinds of scope. Broadly, we can say we have two kinds of scope. One is local variable, and second is global variable. Local variables are variables which are defined inside the function. Global variables are defined outside any function, right? For example, let me quickly create a variable a, which is 10, and let me create a function. Let me call it a1. I'll be taking many examples, so I'm going to use these numbers. And let me define b1, which is 12. So here, a1 is a global variable. As the name suggests, it's global, it's available everywhere. And b1 is a local variable. What this means is that b1 is available only within this function. It's not available outside this function. So for example, if I try and print a1, it works absolutely fine, right? This will print a1. But in case I try to print b1 here, it's not going to work. It's saying b1 is not defined. Now, a1 was a global variable, b1 is a local variable, b1 is not defined. You may argue that I haven't called the function, right? I haven't called the function yet. So maybe calling the function will actually create b1 and then I'll be able to print it. So let's try that, right? The first thing we tried is that you cannot print the local variable without calling the function, okay? Now let's try and call the function first and then let's try to print b1. Even now you cannot do it. I have called the function. As soon as I call this function, we came here, we created this b1, then we are trying to print b1, but b1 is not available. b1 is only available within this function, it's not available outside the function, okay? So let me just print b1 here for you. So b1 got printed inside the function, but outside the function it's saying b1 is not. So that's basically how a local variable is going to be. Okay, that's how a local variable is going to be. Cannot print a local variable outside the function. Perfect. Okay, so the next thing I want to show you, let me just copy this. I'm going to change this to A2, change this to F2, change this to B2, just to avoid any kind of confusion. B2, this is A2, and I'm going to call F2. This is fine, it's going to work fine. The interesting part is you can print a global variable inside the function as well. So what's happening? A2 is 10. This is just definition of F2. F2 is not called yet. I come here, I call print A2. So 10 is printed. Then I call F2. So I go inside the function. B2 is printed, which is 12. Then I'm printing A2, which is 10. So that's how the execution is. So this statement is printed first, then second, then third. Okay, that's how the global variable is being printed. Okay, perfect. An interesting part is, I'm just going to copy this again. I'll make this A3. You can call this even if it's defined below the function. This is fine. So the only thing that is important is when you call the function, this global variable is defined, so you can use this global variable inside the function. It's not that A3 has to be defined above the function, it's just that when you call the function, A3 must have been defined if you want to use A3 inside it. So the only thing is that this variable has to be defined before the function call. But let's say I put a C3, which is 20, which is defined after the function call, and I try to print C3. Now that's not going to work because when you're calling the function, there is no C3 yet. You go inside the function, when you access this line, Python is getting confused that there is no C3. What am I supposed to print? So you can print any global variable that has been defined. You can access any global variable that has been defined before the function call. Any function call that is happening, like any variable that is getting defined after the function call, you cannot access that yet. Okay, so you cannot access this here. So I'm going to comment that out so that we can actually run this. Okay, I'm going to add a comment here. You can access any global variable defined before the function call. Perfect. So you can do that. Okay. Now let's try an interesting thing. Okay. So let me create A4 is equals to 13. Let me define a function 4, which basically changes value of A4 to 12, prints A4, and then let's call F4 and let's call print A4. Let me do it here as well. What do you think should happen? What do you think should happen? So we are setting A4 to be 13. We are defining it. So I don't think this print will have any impact. This should be 13. This should print 13. Because we haven't called the function yet. Now we call the function. So intuitively to me, what it looks like is, we should come here. We should print A4, which is now 12. So it should print 12. Once you're done with the function, it should print 12 again because A4 has now changed. That's what intuitively it looks like. That's not what's going to happen. It actually prints 13, 12, 13. That means this is 13, this is 12, but when you're printing A4 here, it's back to 13. How is that possible? What's happening here is, if you try and access a global variable, it's going to work absolutely fine. But when you actually try and change the value, Python assumes you want to create a local variable. It's assuming that you're creating a local variable, right? For Python, it's assuming that you're creating a local variable. So at this point, you actually have two A4s, one A4 which is global, one A4 which is local. To prove that, let's just print the ID of A4 here, and let's print the ID of A4 here. Both the IDs are different. That basically means they are two different variables. They are not the same variables. Okay, they are different variables. And when you're trying to access, you're not trying to change it. When you're just accessing some value of a global variable, that is fine. But as soon as you try and change the value, Python assumes that you want to create a local variable. You're not trying to use the global one. In case you do want to use the global one, you have to do it a little differently. Within the function, if you want to use the global A4, you just need to write global A4. Now, because you have specifically said, hey, the A4 I am going to use is the one which is globally available, Python is not going to create a new local variable, and you will be able to use the global A4 that was available to you. Okay, you will be able to use the global A4 that was available to you. Now they are the same, right? The IDs are the same. So what's getting printed? Here, before the function call, you're printing 13. Here, after, here is the function call. Inside the function call, you print, it's getting printed 12. The ID is this. And now you are saying, after the function, you're saying print A4, and it is again 12, which was previously 13, because the global variable was not changed in that case. We created a new local variable. But here, we are not creating any local variable. The same global variable is getting changed. Okay, that's how you can use the global keyword. Okay, so basically, whenever you're calling a function, variables of that functions are limited to that function. In case you want to access them outside, the only way you can do it is return their value. For example, when we created the factorial function, we wanted to get access the n underscore factorial, right? We wanted to access n underscore factorial outside. So we just returned the value. So for example here, let me create a new cell. Let's say I have a function f. I have a variable here b, which is 10. I have done a bunch of calculation to calculate this value of b. And now I want to access this b outside. But you can't do that. When you say you want to access b outside, what you really mean is that you want to have the value that was associated with b, right? So the simplest solution will be that you return b. You can store this b in any variable that you want, and you can use this variable. This will have the required value that was associated with b. Okay? So the only way for you to get access to the local variables of function is basically that the function returns those values to you. Otherwise, the local variables are limited to the function itself. Just to quickly, within a minute, revise it. What all we discussed? We have global variables, we have local variables. Global variables are defined outside any function, local variables are within the function. You can access global variables inside the function, but you cannot access local variables outside the function. You can, if you try to change a global variable, this is Python by default is going to assume that you want to create a new local variable. If you do want to use the global variable inside a function, change its value as well, then you need to specifically say global A4, which basically is telling Python that, hey, I don't want to create a new local variable. I want to use that global A4 and change its value. Okay, so you need to specifically tell Python that. Perfect. So please practice, please just play around with variables a little bit, try to see what exactly is happening within and outside the function, and you'll be able to get some clarity on that. Okay, thank you. Hi. So I hope you're getting more and more comfortable with functions, right? So actually we have been using functions since the first or second lecture itself. These functions were not defined by us. They were something that were in Python already, and we were using them right away. For example, print. We have been using the print function from the beginning, right? So similarly, there are a lot of functions in Python which we use, which basically have been defined for us, and we don't have to write them again. That's the beauty of functions, right? So, but just to be clear, some of things which will look like functions are not really functions. For example, range is not really a function that is written in Python. That's something else. Let's not go into the details of that. But there have been functions that we have been using, and we will be using a lot of functions going forward. Now, specifically talking about the print function, if you remember, we were calling print this way. We were also able to call print with a string, and we were saying end is equals to something, right? We also said end is equals to something. So we had an option to provide this parameter, to provide this argument, and we had an option to call print function without that as well. And it was very useful, right? So it seems like there has to be a way. So far, the way we have written functions, if we say our function needs one argument, you need to provide that one argument. If you don't provide that one argument, it's going to be an error. Okay? If your function accepts one argument and you pass two, that's going to be a problem as well. For example, let's quickly see this. For example, I have a function f which takes one argument, prints n. Now if I call f, it's going to be a mistake. It's saying it required one positional argument. One argument is required. And in case you do this, it's saying it's an error because one was required, you're giving two. But seems like print was able to accept one argument as well as two arguments. So there is something interesting happening there, right? So when you create a function, you can actually allow the function to be called with different number of arguments. Okay, so let's create a function like that. Okay, so I'm creating a function, let's say sum, which I'm saying will require two arguments. It's a very simple function. It returns a plus b. Now I want to have a capability that instead of two, I should be able to pass three arguments as well. And it will return a plus b plus c. Now my other option is create a sum1, a new function which takes three arguments a, b, c and returns a plus b plus c. Right? So I have two functions. One which accepts two arguments returns a plus b. One which accepts three arguments returns the sum of those three. That is fine, but I don't want to do that. I want to create only one function which can take two as well as three arguments. So this is not something that I want to do. No. So what you can do is, you can say this, that hey, I want to take three arguments and I'll return sum of all three. But Python allows you to give a default value for the argument. What that means is, I can say c is equals to 0. That basically means I can decide whether I want to give c or not. If I give two arguments, c will be by default taken to be 0. If I give three arguments, the third value will be used as the value of c and 0 will not be taken. That basically means I can call sum 2, 3, 4. It gives me 9, which is perfect. Let me print this. But I can also call this, and now c by default is taken to be 0. To prove this, you can print c inside here. And for my first call, c was 4. For my second call, c was 0. That's how default value of arguments work. So by default, c's value is 0. In case you pass something, that's perfect. In case of print, by default, end was new line. By default, it was taking you to new line. Right? When you pass it, then you are able to change it. Right? Then you are able to change it. That's what we call default value of arguments. Right? That's how you can give default value to arguments. Okay, let me take another example. Function f, it takes three arguments again, and let's say it returns a plus b plus c. Now can I do this? A is equals to 0. Can I do a is equals to 0? So, seems like you should be able to do it, right? Seems like you should be able to do it. Let me just call this. But it's giving an error. It's saying a non-default argument is following a default argument. These two are non-default. They cannot follow a default argument. And I'll tell you why that is not allowed. It's basically saying put all your non-default arguments first, then put all your default arguments. So default, all the arguments which have default values should be here. All non-default, which don't have any default arguments, should be first. Okay. So this is not allowed. All non-default arguments should be before arguments with default values. Okay, that's how it should be. Now, if you want, you can actually create a function which has, let's say, 4 variables, and you can give default values to more than one of them, but they have to be the rightmost ones. Now, that is important because if that's not true, right? First of all, what does it mean to have 2 arguments with default? So now you can call f1 this way. So you have 4 arguments, right? Let me print this. Now you can call it with 2 arguments. Calling with 4 means C and D will take 4 and 5. Calling with 2 means C will take 2 and D will take 0, and A and B will get these 2 values, right? If you want, you can also call it using 3 arguments. Now that's the fun part. When you're saying you want to pass 3 arguments, 2 goes to A, B takes 3, 5 goes to C, and D takes the default value. So we start assigning values starting from here in this direction. We start from here and we go in this way. So the last one will actually return 2 plus 3 plus 5 plus 0, right? So it should return 2 plus 3 plus 5 plus 0, which is 10, which is perfect. So that's how it's going to work. In the second one, it gave me 2 plus 3 plus 2, which is 7, plus 0, which is 7. So it's printing 7, right? That's exactly the reason, in case I allow default and non-default to start mixing up. For example, let's say if I had allowed, let's say if we start allowing mixing up, now what does this mean? F of 1, 2. Does it mean that B takes 1 and C takes 2? But the first argument should go to A, right? It should not go to B. So it's a little confusing. And if you give, for example, now let me take D is equals to 10 here, and I give 3 arguments, it becomes more confusing. Should 1 and 2 go to B and C? Or should 2 and 4 go to B and C? If 2 and 4 go to B and C, what does 1 go to? Where does 1 go? Right, so things become confusing if you allow default arguments to come before non-default arguments. So, very, very simple. You first put non-default arguments which don't have default values, then you put the ones which have default values. When a function is called, the first arguments are passed to these non-default ones. Then if you have any additional, they start getting assigned to these variables which are basically have default values, but they start getting filled up in this direction. So for example, if I had 5 default arguments, 3 non-default arguments, and I pass you 5 arguments total, 3 of these will be used for these, and 2 of them will be used for the first 2 here. Okay, so that's how the default arguments work. So you can make a function which accepts multiple number of arguments. You can take 2 arguments, 3 arguments, 4 arguments, and so on. So that's totally up to you. In a later video, in a later chapter, in a later lecture, we will actually talk about that you can create functions which can accept any number of arguments. You can pass it 100 arguments and you don't have to write 100 variables in the function. But we'll talk about that when we get to it. Okay. For now, you are able to create these arguments, and you are able to use them. But just one thing, is there any way that I can pass A, B, and D? So as I said, here they were A, B, and C, and D took the default value. Is there any way I can pass A, B, and D? You can. So you can call F1, and the way in case of print we were saying end is equals to something. If you want, you can say 2, 3. They will go to A and B, and then you can say D is equals to 3, and D will take 3 as the value. So what's happening here is A takes 2, B takes 3, D takes 3, so C takes the default value, which is 2. So you can also give the argument value by specifically mentioning which argument should take it, right? Which argument should take it. Will this work? This cannot work, because here you're saying C is 3, D is 3, this is taken. Now you have left only one value which will be taken by A, there is nothing for B, and that's going to be a problem. It's saying you are missing one required argument, which is B. That cannot work. So while calling a function, you can tell, you don't have to maintain the order. You don't even have to maintain the order. For example, I can say B is equals to 2, and I can say A is equals to 10. This is fine, right? A takes 10 value, If you're not giving the names, then the order is taken as per the order of arguments here. But if you're specifically saying, hey, A is this, B is this, C is this, D is this, then the order doesn't really matter, and you can do that. Okay? Perfect. Please play around with this, and it'll really help you understand some of the inbuilt functions, as well as it'll basically allow you to write functions without having to repeatedly create multiple functions for multiple different number of arguments, right? Perfect. Thank you.